Hello, my name is Catherine Lewis. I'm a student on Textiles 3 Personal Specialism. This is a look through my sketchbooks from assignment 1 to assignment 5 and how my journey through personal specialism has created the final piece of my menopause coverlet. In assignment 1, we were asked to do a mini proposal. During this proposal, I did a lot of artwork, drawing and painting of ladybirds. It was quite a specialised particular topic, and looking back and reflecting on this, it does seem a little bit too detached and not a big enough project for me to then scale down into specific areas. Also, I don't feel as though I've got the right engagement in taking through the images into my sampling work, so it does look very stilted. However, what I can take from this is how much I do love painting and drawing and then carrying that through. So that's something that I really do like from my practice. Going forward into assignment 2, I developed the idea of having the proposal as my menopause, This subject came about because I was looking at my critical review and researching a lot of artists who were looking at breaking down taboos in society. And they were often very, very personal reasons for this. They had a journey, they felt the actual subject matter they were doing was extremely personal and opened up. And this is where I started to think about emotion and how I was feeling and what was affecting me as a person. And the overriding thing that came out of that was the menopause, because I'm currently and was going under that journey. So I developed a very strong colour palette in pinks, reds, and sometimes into deep purples and blacks. And I used a lot of weaving and crocheting during that time. The weaving and the crocheting was very, very much a comfort blanket for me in assignment 2. And the reason for this was I wanted to still create something, but I went through very much of a mind fog because my mum was dying, and it was really difficult to focus on a way ahead and the future. So I just focused on creating, and the materials almost took over me for a while. So then when we talked, and Rebecca was a great help in moving my mind through to looking at a finished piece at the end, and that started to bring me into how I was feeling and looking how I could develop that. Again, another significant part of my time on the proposal and the assignments was when I visited the Judy Chicago retrospective, and I saw how much she reached inside of her and developed her journey and showed very, very personal narratives. So this was something that I felt also I could start to look at. And by starting to look at, I looked at myself and self-portraiture. So I did a lot of quite naive mark-making drawings around this time to show how I was feeling through the menopause, and also almost storybooks and lots of writing. And this was something that I'd thought about when I was looking at some of the work of Kaz Holmes and how she develops her work through storybooks, through adding lots and lots of different ideas into sketchbooks. And that helped with me developing my sketchbooks in assignment 3, and just literally just putting any ideas down, thoughts, what I was wanted to write, just picking up bits of fabric, seeing how they stick together, just doing tiny little samples. And this really did move my work on a lot, to just trying out new ideas and not worrying about what outcome they might have. As I've spoken about looking at what my final picture was through the proposals and through refining proposals, the quilt or coverlet as it finished developed. And from my initial samplings of work, and this is one of my early samples, which was redone in the colour palette to actually go on the final coverlet. I took my drawings and marked them out on muslin or fabric and then stitched. And it's the fragility that comes through on these that I really, really love. So this one was just an idea of how the coverlet could look. And I used dyes to get the fabric colours I wanted, and used old recycled fabrics wherever I could. So the basis for the coverlet is actually an old duvet of mine. I will hold my hands up. I'm not strictly a quilt maker, so I used what was available for me, and what I felt was quite personal fabrics, and made the quilt in the thought process I had, with samples added to the duvet cover. And so this was very exciting to start to bring my work through and my images. So there's a lot of line work to help me bring the stitching work through onto the samples and my final pieces. Looking at loads and loads of different fabrics, a lot of recycled clothes in here, some that I wear, some that other people have given me, and also bringing into the idea of a pattern. This is a lino cut uterus that I did with acrylic paint on different fabrics, and that was the pattern that came into the final piece as well. During assignment 5, I looked and reflected on what I felt was missing from the pieces that I'd done for the coverlet. As I previously mentioned, pattern was one. So I developed more the pattern into the coverlet, but also wanted to do more free-flowing imagery. And so really started to develop how I was doing self-portraiture and what line work I want to develop and strengthen in certain parts, to then look at how I take that through into stitching. So it was quite exciting to do this much more free-flowing work. And I was also painting muslin as well, and then thickening up certain areas for the prominence of the stitching later on in my work. This image has been developed and appears on the coverlet as well, with painted muslin and stitched. Then obviously still looking at poses as well, which is still important, whilst it's the self-portraiture of the head and the torso. The actual poses of body are something that I want to still look at. This area is when I started to look at the silent scream. It's an idea that I'm still developing, but obviously there's monk in the background here, but it's more, that's about mental health, and I wanted to say menopause is still one of the most discriminatory taboos, and how to get that from being the silent scream. So that was something in my future work that I'm going to look at, and I've been developing some designs and drawings about the silent scream, and that's a thought that I want to park for the minute, but take into future work. Going back to the work that I was currently doing for my coverlet, I've been leaving threads just open and doing much more chaotic stitching, showing the back of the stitching and using that as on my final coverlet, because it's a journey that we go on in the menopause. It's not something that is neat and tidy. It is chaotic and often messy. It messes with our heads, but it just makes us a little bit more feeling of chaos in the world. That's in my opinion. The final coverlet, there's a photograph here, I uploaded to the Menopause Cafe and had lovely comments back. The Menopause Cafe is a society that was developed in Scotland, and since lockdown, it's become online a lot more, and I've attended some of the virtual sessions, and they're very, very interesting. So I uploaded the image and just mentioned that this is how I was feeling and this is what I've developed. And I received a lot of favourable comments back, and was asked by one of the founders if I would display this at their conference in Scotland next year, of which I said yes. So this is my final piece, and it fits in with my proposal very well from the perspective that I've created a very strong piece to allow people to talk about the menopause, of particularly the hot flushes and night sweats. And thank you for listening to me. Goodbye.